Hey everybody. All right. So people have said, if I've never read the Bible before, if I want to really get into it, where's a good place to start? Well, best answer, in my opinion, is one of the Gospels. And so we figured we'd do that and start with the shortest one, Mark. And it's probably the earliest one written. Um, so what we're going to start doing is, starting tomorrow, we're going to read a chapter and have a little light commentary. This is not a deep dive. If you want deeper dives, if you want to get further into the Word, Mike Winger, shout out to you. He's got a Mark series that is
70.
amazing, and it's 70 episodes long. It's, you want to know, he's got it. This one's going to be a much lighter version. It's just to kind of get people in. The Bible's like the ocean. It's shallow enough for a toddler to walk in, but how deep does it go? So we're going to kind of go in the wading, maybe slightly breaststroke area, if you will, of it. And today we're going to do a little bit about Mark. Talk about the gospel itself, and kind of go from there. Okay. My name is Jeff Reed. This is my wife Crystal. And hopefully my little baby girl, 18 months old, will be a little bit chill for us right now while we do this. And little man who is 5 as well. We'll see. All right. So Mark, let's get into this a little bit here. First off, a little bit about Mark. Who is he as a person? First off, he would probably be more accurately called John Mark. If you look at Acts 12:25, 15:37 through 39, you can see referenced. That's his full name, if you will. He was Barnabas' cousin, as in Paul and Barnabas. You can find out in Colossians 4:10. He went with Paul on his first missionary journey. That's in Acts 12:25, 13:5. Not the best light for Mark on that one. He kind of bailed on him. But it's okay. It's okay. He redeemed himself, if you will. He kind of grew in some maturity and strength, and he proved himself to Paul. In Colossians 4:10, Philemon 24, 2 Titus 4:11, you can see where Paul's like, hey, he can come on back. He's useful to us. Please welcome him in, and so forth. Mark is very close to Peter. Matter of fact, Peter even refers to him as my son, Mark. And that's in 1 Peter 5:13. I don't know about you, but if I'm going to call somebody literally my son, or around that area, if you will, I'm going to be pretty close to them. Okay, so a little bit about the background of Mark. Seems to be targeted more towards the Roman believer, especially Gentiles. He used, some evidence of this is used Latin expressions instead of Greek equivalents. You can see that in Mark 5:9. He makes a reference to legion. By the way, I'm going to give certain examples here as we go through this, but I'm just going to keep it to one or maybe two. There are a lot of biblical references, but just for time's sake. He translated Aramaic almost every time he used it, like in Mark 3:17. Boanerges he uses, and that means sons of thunder. He says right there, Boanerges, sons of thunder, translates it for them. Most of the audience, it seems to be most of the audience wouldn't speak Aramaic. I used the Roman time system. Mark 6:48. He talked about the fourth watch. That's that 3 a.m. to 6 a.m. time frame. That was the Roman time system. Again, multiple references to these, but he explained Jewish customs. This was a big one for me personally. Mark 7:3-4. He talked about washing and cleansing, what have you, as Jewish traditions talked about. The Pharisees, Sadducees kind of went in depth on that. If you're talking to a Jewish audience, I don't think you need to tell them too much about their customs. Now, you could argue some of them might have been Hellenistic, more Hellenistic, but they would still have some idea. So it seemed to be geared more towards Roman believers, again, especially the Gentiles. And also, this is believed to be written in Italy, specifically Rome. So that makes sense. Multiple other things we can go on about that, but we'll leave it there for now. So let's go about a little bit about the themes of Mark, the historical and theological. Mark tended to present Jesus as a suffering servant. That was more of his theme about it. You can Mark 10:45. You can see a reference to that, and again, multiple other ones. He was more focused on the deeds, works of Jesus instead of the teachings. Not that he didn't do the teachings, but he was more focused on this. But he really focused in on the service and the sacrifice that Jesus did. He utilized brief gists of Jesus' teachings a lot of times. He doesn't have much about the personal, private life of Jesus. He doesn't really start the gospel like at Jesus' birth. He starts the gospel at John the Baptist, at Jesus' baptism, and his beginning of his public ministry, essentially. He demonstrates the humanity of Jesus with a lot more clarity than others. He goes into that a little bit more. For example, human emotions, that's in Mark 1:41. You can see it where Jesus is moved to compassion for the leprous man. He talks about the human limitations of Jesus in like Mark 4:38. Jesus was so exhausted he fell asleep during a storm on a boat and didn't wake up. He had been healing all day long and he was wiped, essentially. And if you're asleep on a boat during a storm, and these are not big ships, these are kind of small, you're tired. Of course, he wakes up and peace be still instantly. But he talks about it there. And again, lots and lots of other ones that kind of go on more the human side, if you will, of Jesus. Okay, so now we're going to do a little bit about the authorship and the date of the gospel according to Mark. It's important to do these, I think, because some people question the authorship, if you will, of it, which I find fascinating, because it's history, if you will. You don't normally inject yourself, so to speak, if you're writing about history or writing about an account of something. Like the epistles and stuff, they're writing, and it's obvious who they're writing about. They're writing about what they're experiencing, what's going on with that, but in the Gospels, not so much. I don't know why that's the standard, because like Plutarch, he wrote 50 biographies, if I'm not mistaken, and his name is not put in there. It's not referenced at all. But there's not really a question on that one. Okay, so let's get into this a little bit. Some external sources, extra biblical. All right, you got Tertullian of Carthage, it's 207 AD time frame. He stated that Mark wrote this gospel and affirmed that Mark was Peter's interpreter. Now, Peter, who's eyewitness of Jesus Christ, of the ministry of it, was the source of Mark's gospel. He also stated that the four gospels have been called by their known names, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, from the beginning. They've always been known as this. He stated that the churches that the apostles started in Corinth and so forth have been utilizing these four gospels and only these four gospels. And these churches vouched for these gospels, that they were apostolic in origin. All right? Tertullian is stating these as known facts. He's not really building an apologia or a case. It's used to refute the heretic Marcion. Interesting guy. Clement of Alexandria, it's at 180 time frame. Mark wrote the gospel by request. Clement states that Mark wrote this gospel by request for the church in Rome that heard Peter's teachings. They really wanted to have a written record. They really weren't satisfied with just hearing it. They wanted to have a written record. And this also would help so that they would know if someone tried to change anything. It's written down here. This is what it is. No changes to it. All right? And also for reference perspective. You got in 150 AD time frame, Justin Martyr. You got a dialogue with Trypho. It's chapter 103. States that Mark is the memoirs of Peter. He also references Luke and the others. It kind of stipulates that all the Gospels are memoirs. You got Papias of Hierapolis. That's Asia Minor area. That's 125 AD. He interviewed witnesses and compared what they said about Jesus to ensure it traced back to the apostles. He's interviewed John the Elder, a.k.a. John the Beloved, a.k.a. John the Disciple. It's believed he did these interviews around the 80s time frame, and John being the youngest disciple, or believed to be the youngest disciple, or one of them, would have been alive then to talk to him about it, okay? And then later in life, 125 time frame, wrote this account. Papias learned that not only was the gospel penned by someone named Mark, but that it was Mark that traveled with Peter, and quotes 1 Peter 5:13, my son, Mark. He states that Peter was a primary source again for the gospel according to Mark. One of Mark's primary roles was to enhance Peter's Greek. Peter knew some Greek, but he was trying to enhance it. Greek can be interesting, especially when written. All right. Let's go over a little locations for this, okay? You got Carthage. It's about 1,100 miles from Alexandria. This is in Egypt. And Hierapolis, it's about 1,500 miles by land and about 500 miles by boat. And we didn't talk about this, but again, there's so many more things. We're just giving you some synopsises, some quick ones. There's Arenas in France. That's over here. So you kind of got the four corners of the Roman Empire essentially covered up by this. That's where all this is at this time. Now, why is that significant? They don't have social media, they don't have internet and so forth. They only got the Pony Express really, this situation. So this is all over that area in this time frame. That's pretty impressive. Well, at least it is to me. All right, now you got some sources against John Mark being the author of Gospel Mark. At around 400 AD, you got Augustine versus Faustus. Faustus is challenging the authorship of the Gospel of Mark. Augustine's kind of give him side eye a little bit. It says Augustine pointed out that the hypocrisy of Faustus challenging the authorship of Mark. Stating this same type of challenge isn't really presented with other historical works like Hippocrates. Reason being, there's a succession of testimonies from the time of Hippocrates to the present day at that time frame, which makes this claim unreasonable due to the unbroken chain of evidence. You could apply this to works of Cicero, Aristotle, Varro, Plato, etc. The double standard here is kind of mind-blowing. The reality is, if you can't trust Mark, then you really can't trust the other ones, because it's the same concept at a minimum, with actually more documentation for Mark. But again, apologetic light. The internal sources are just, there's mountains of that, plethora, if you will. So I just kind of go over a few of the more unique ones, at least from my perspective, interesting ones. Every copy of Mark is referenced as the Gospel according to Mark, wherever it is. Okay, every single one. There's not really any variations here. This was not a standard way of naming a book you penned. All right. You typically have the author's name and then the title. Aristotle's Poetics, Plato's Republic. Okay, so that was, interesting. The focus being, this is the gospel, not about Mark, per se. So I thought that was interesting. Mark has an inclusio in it. Okay, it's a bookend, essentially, referencing Peter, and it's a way of pointing to the eyewitness or source without specifically breaking into your account or story, listing them. It's a way of subtly mentioning them as it flows through. I thought that was pretty cool. And you can see that in Mark 1:16 and Mark 16:17. Peter is referenced in Mark more than any other gospel. A lot of the accounts seem to come from Peter's perspective. What did Peter see? What did Peter think? What did Peter observe? Like so forth. Mark 11:20, for example, that's the fig tree reference. And there are lots of motives. If there's a situation where Peter's involved in any way, shape, or form, or if the disciples as a group, you're going to hear about Peter. And which is, again, why is that significant? Because he's the source, the eyewitness. All right. Again, I would encourage you to check out Bachman or Mike Winger, who references Bachman a lot as well. If you want a lot more information, this is just a taste, or maybe a bite at this point in time. There's so much good stuff out there to help on both sides to really understand and grasp. I personally think the side of it being written by Mark, it being the Word of God, it being one of the Gospels, is overwhelming. But I again encourage you to read that, check it out, and we will be doing chapter 1 tomorrow, and with a little light commentary in there as well. All right. Y'all have a good one, and take care, okay? All right.